Happy! Meet Happy, our family milk cow. She's a 4-year-old purebred Guernsey and the heart of our homestead. She comes when we call her name and spends every morning offering us her liquid gold for our family to make into yogurt, ice cream, butter, cheese, and so much more. Stay tuned today as we walk through how to make homemade mozzarella cheese, because once you've had your own, you can never go back. So I originally learned this streamlined method of making mozzarella cheese from a friend named Kate. She has a YouTube channel as well called Venison for Dinner. And so this is sort of like a modified version of what I learned from her mozzarella method. And it is super easy. It takes like 30 minutes to throw it all together, and all you need is a gallon of milk, some citric acid, and some rennet. So I'm gonna show you exactly how we do it. It's just a one pot thing, and it's helpful to have a meat thermometer because you're going to need to take temperature of your milk. And the kicker from all this is that when we do it, the great thing about mozzarella cheese for us is that we always use our cream to make butter or ice cream or whipped cream or anything like that. Like the cream from our raw milk is like the liquid gold. So I don't love to part with it. I like to keep it, I like to skim it off the top so you can see the cream line right there on this jar, and then you can see it on this jar too. So the cream, because it's fat, will always separate and rise to the top of raw milk, and then we just skim it off and we store it in another jar to make all sorts of goodies with it. And the great thing about this recipe is that when we skim it off, the mozzarella cheese is actually easier to make with the skimmed milk. So if you're going to the grocery store to buy milk, I wouldn't suggest that you buy skimmed milk. You would buy like a full fat milk, because what my skimmed milk would probably be what the grocery store's whole milk would be. So you're gonna go and you're gonna get whole milk. But if you're making this with raw milk, you wanna skim the cream off and leave very little behind, because it's the sugars and the proteins that are gonna really pull the mozzarella cheese together. It's gonna firm up, and it's gonna be a lot easier for you to work with if you take the fat off the top. So I always thought with cheese, it's better to leave all the fat there. It's actually better to remove it off of it. So we're gonna go ahead and skim these ones, and then I'm gonna dump enough into one of the gallon jars, because this recipe takes 1 gallon of your skimmed milk. So this is actually a liter of cream that we had skimmed a couple days ago and fermented. So what I do with that is I put my kefir into a liter of my cream and I let it ferment, and it ferments at room temperature. And then we have fermented cultured butter. So I just pour this into my mixer, and we're gonna go ahead and make butter from this. And I'm just gonna skim off the cream and put it right back into this jar after we dump this out. So this cream that we're skimming off today, my kids want Score Blizzards from Dairy Queen. So we are gonna make Score Blizzards out of our cream. We're gonna just take off kind of as much as you can get. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can leave a little bit behind, but for the most part, it does really well with, I'm making a huge mess there. It does really well to get most of the cream skimmed off. And then what's really nice about that is then you have a gallon of milk that you can make more than just a ball of mozzarella cheese out of. You can also make some butter or some ice cream. Okay, so you can see with this one, there's a little tiny ring of cream left on that, and that's fine. So we're gonna leave that just like that. And we're gonna skim this one as well. Just from one milking, we have our full liter of cream, a little bit more than a liter of cream. So you can make butter with that. That'll make about 2 cups of butter. Or we can make ice cream, which that's what we're gonna do. You can do anything with that. Drink it in your coffee, whatever you'd like to do. And then we're left over with this, our skimmed milk. So I'm just gonna top up this one. So we're at a full gallon. That is gonna be used for our mozzarella. And then we still have this one left over that you can use just to drink, or you can make chocolate milk out of it, or whatever you want to do. So just from one milking from our cow, we have so much bounty that that we can make. So we are going to get started. We're going to use this one for our mozzarella. So I like to shake it up shake that cream in with it. And we'll put these ones back in the fridge. So as we get everything geared up here, I really like to be prepared before we start the process. So we have to do our citric acid, and this is going to be diluted. So both of these, the rennet and the citric acid, will be diluted into a 1/4 cup of cool water. So we're just going to do 1 teaspoon and then 1/2. So 1½ teaspoons of your citric acid. And then I just set that aside. We'll dilute it in a bit. And then for your rennet, I really suggest getting an animal rennet from a reliable source, from an ethical source. Using vegetable rennet is really unpredictable. I don't like using it. And most of our cheeses today are actually made with microbial enzymes, which is really difficult for our body to digest. So it's best to make your cheese and eat cheese that is made out of rennet of some kind. So this, we just need a 1/4 teaspoon. We buy our rennet from, you can get it on like a cheese making, I think it's cheesemaking.com website, and same with our citric acid. Or you can get citric acid on Amazon as well. Okay, so then those are ready. We're just gonna set them aside. And when I'm ready for them, I'm just going to pour a 1/4 cup of cool water in before we add them into our recipe. So let's go ahead and pour our gallon of milk into our big pot. So if you're gonna double this, if you're gonna make more mozzarella, obviously you need a bigger pot, but you'll just wanna double up on your rennet and your citric acid too. Okay, so then I'm just gonna turn this on kind of like a medium temperature. And we have our meat thermometer here. So it's just a thermometer that I use specifically. It's a meat thermometer, but I use it specifically for cheeses and yogurts. I really like this one. It's called a thermopop, but you can use any type of meat thermometer to make your cheese with. So we've turned this on. We're gonna bring this to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. So let's check and see what it is at right now. It's at 46, and I pretty much just brought this right out of the fridge. So it has to come up 10 degrees Fahrenheit to 55, and then for us to add in our citric acid. So this is something that you're gonna really wanna kind of babysit and pay attention to. But the nice thing is it doesn't take very long to make. So we're at about 55, 56. If this gets up to like 65, 66, you're still fine. If it gets up higher than that, you're gonna just wanna take it off your element, bring the temperature back down to between 55 and 60 before you add your citric acid in. So I have stirred in a 1/4 cup of cool water to my citric acid and just kind of dissolve it in that. And then we're just gonna go ahead and pour it into our milk. Make sure that it all comes in. And then you're just gonna take like a big spoon or spatula, and you're just gonna kind of make zigzag patterns in your milk just to make sure that that is all completely incorporated and evenly distributed in your milk. And then after that, you're just gonna do nothing. You're just gonna sit and wait. So now we're bringing the temperature to 88 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, you just kind of wanna come back and forth. Make sure that you're kind of in the middle of your milk. So we're all the way up to probably 65, 66 now. And we'll just keep checking it until it gets up to 88 degrees, and it can get as high as 95, so same thing. High as 95, you're still safe. If it gets higher than that, we're gonna bring it off the element and bring it back down below 95. You also wanna come in and just stir it occasionally. If you have a propane stove, this isn't as much of a concern, but I find my element on my stove is a little uneven, so sometimes I might read like 75 in one spot, like 85 in another. So right now we're sitting at probably 75 across the board. So we're currently sitting around 90 degrees. And so we're gonna go ahead, I poured a 1/4 cup of cool water in with my animal rennet, and I'm gonna go ahead and dump that into the milk. And we're just going to do the same thing that we did with the citric acid. So we're just gonna stir it kind of zigzag just to fully incorporate it into the milk. And if you have a stove like mine, so you don't have a propane element, you can just turn the element off at this point and just leave it alone. If you do have propane, I have never cooked mozzarella on a propane element. You would probably just turn it off or perhaps leave it on really low. You just might have to play with that. But we're gonna leave this, and what's gonna happen is after we add the rennet, it's gonna form a curd on the top. It's gonna kind of solidify on the top, and I'm gonna show you how you check to make sure that's done. But it should take about 10-12 minutes, and you don't have to do anything to it. You just leave it here, and if you forget about it for an hour or a couple hours, it's totally fine. It is completely fine. It's gonna form the curd and it's just gonna sit there. So if you forget about it, and it's not a big deal, you can come back to it and we can keep cooking it after. But if you're in a bit of a rush and you wanna squeeze this into your half an hour timeline, just 10-12 minutes, we should form that curd, and I'll show you how to check to make sure it's done. So a way to check and see if it's ready is you can take your finger, or you can even take like a butter knife, and you just gently squish it, and when you bring it out, it should be clean. So it can bring up parts from underneath as well, but you'll see how the curd is now ready. If it comes up and there's stuff all over your knife or your finger, then that just means it needs to sit a little bit longer. But this is, excuse me, fully ready. So we're just gonna go and we're gonna cut into our curd. So you don't actually have to do this part. I prefer it. I find it really satisfying, and I really like to do it. If you want, you can just kind of break it up. You can just stir it all up with your wooden spoon, but I like to come in, and this also tells me how kind of firm the curd is. So I just go and I cut it in strips, and then I cut it in squares. And if it was pulling and sticking, then I know that it's not done. Okay, so then we're gonna turn our burner back on, and we're just going to stir this all up. So that's what I mean by, you don't have to technically cut all those squares in. I just like to do it. So you can stir this all up. And at this point, we are taking the whey to about 130 degrees. I find mine doesn't start to really stretch nicely until about 135, 137. So get that in there. We're not even quite to 100 degrees yet because we had to turn that burner off. And this is also the time in the process where we're gonna go through and we're gonna add our salt into the whey. So I just like to pull the curd out of the whey as best I can and just kind of sprinkle salt into the whey, and it's all gonna mix in together anyway. And what we're doing here is, as the temperature starts to rise, it's not gonna look like this. It's not going to be pieced together. As we pull it to the edge, it's gonna squish together and start to get really firm, like mozzarella. But the temperature has to rise in order for that to happen. You can't do it without keep taking that temperature up over 120 degrees. So again, we're just gonna wait and keep testing it. At this point, I tend to put my thermometer away and I kind of just go by feel. So as we come back, we're gonna stir it every few minutes, and it's gonna stick together a little bit better every time. Sometimes this process takes a little bit longer at this point, and if you're getting up to like 120, 125 and you're not seeing that your cheese is sticking together and it's still kind of coming apart, keep going, have faith, it will eventually come together. So the temperature has gotten up to about 127, and you'll start to see it's coming together as one. So it's still not ready to stretch yet. It's still pretty soft, but it's coming. So once we get up to that 135 mark, we're gonna really start to notice a huge difference. We're gonna be able to get in there and really stretch out our mozzarella. So at this point, you just wanna focus on kind of getting it into a ball as best you can so that you have all those curds and there's nothing kind of hanging behind when you're ready to stretch out your mozzarella. So we just leave it in there, let it cook a bit longer. So we're at a point now where this should be stretching. So if you need to wear gloves for this part, that's totally fine. And you'll also see that as it gets to the point where it can be stretched, it gets smaller, which is unfortunate because you want as much cheese as you can get, but it does get smaller. So it's still pretty lumpy right there. So we're just gonna go ahead and we're just gonna stretch it. Again, if you need gloves, and I may need to put mine on. And so it's stretching really nicely, and the more we stretch it, the smoother it's gonna get. So let's try for a different angle to make sure that you can see. I added my gloves. Okay, so we're just stretching. It's hard to get it kind of all in the same frame, but don't worry about it making a mess. So see how it's starting to now get quite a bit smoother the more that we stretch it, and the warmer that it gets. And sometimes you have to dunk it back down in that hot whey to be able to stretch it even further. And it will inevitably drip and make a mess. Okay, so now as we start to stretch it, I'm going to dunk it back in, and we're going to start to form a ball now. So now that it's been stretched, it's starting to get smooth. Mine still looks a little stringy. That tends to happen with mine. It just kind of is a hit or miss. But you want to mold it into your ball as best you can. And again, keep dunking it into that hot whey, and that's what's going to give you that smooth. And the other thing you can do with this too is you can, as you're stretching it, you can rip little balls off and roll into little mini mozzarella balls. So you can do either one. I like the mini mozzarella balls because when you put them on, like you can do like a pizza with your balls, your little mozzarella balls, and it's very pretty. So one more dunk, and then I think we're pretty much done. There's our mozzarella ball. Okay. So again, the other thing you can do with this is you can put it in a square container so that it makes like a block of mozzarella. Mozzarella freezes really nicely as well, but let's just go ahead, take a couple slices off of it because it's still pretty warm. This makes the best grilled cheese sandwiches. Your sandwiches will stretch so far. And then let's put a little bit of salt on it. Beautiful, delicious mozzarella cheese. Yum.